We're going to do this live. I mean, not really live. It's live to tape, as they say. Welcome to another edition of Thinking Out Loud. Everybody, we are back from the combine. It is the calm before the storm, before free agency. Next week, we come to you from a stormy Southern California where it rained today and the people were frightened. My name is Andrew Siciliano. We ask you and thank you in advance to like and subscribe and do all the things you normally do with the podcasts or the YouTubes. We thank you. Tell your friends about it. My friend is Sam Betesh. She is on this show as we go on this journey yet again under the banner. There is no off season. I mean, even tonight, there is no off night. Joey Bosa is getting cut by the Chargers. Not surprising. He's played 3 full seasons in 9 seasons as a Charger, but he's the last remaining guy to come from San Diego. I'm looking for a Charger call. The call is tonight. Joey Bosa is going to be a free agent as we head towards next week. There is no such thing as legal tampering. We'll get into all of this. Regardless, Sam Betesh, how the heck are you? I'm sorry we didn't do a show at the end of the well, not the end, upon my departure from Indianapolis last Friday.
That's all right. You had a great trip, and it was fantastic to see some of your takeaways from the combine, and I'm glad you got to see everybody up close and personal the way that you did, and I'm fascinated to hear some of your thoughts on the quarterbacks, etc., from what you did see there. And yes, the rain in Southern California. Should we discuss? I mean, it's been talked about, but
it's really not that bad today.
No, but it's hilarious to just see people on the roads in LA. I mean, it rains and then just
it's not that bad. I mean, joking aside, obviously with the horrible fires in January, the rain can create mudslides, which especially in the Palisades or if you're at the base of the mountains in Altadena or Pasadena, yeah, it is really bad. So joking aside, as much as we need the rain and we need the water, it can be bad in the burn zones. That being said, rain is just treated differently here. I honestly didn't know it was going to rain. The reason I didn't know is because I'm one of these Southern Californians, lived here for 25 years, that never looks at the weather on his phone.
Do we
because
need to?
That's my point. We don't need to. The weather rarely changes. We're not like San Diego. San Diego's got better weather, but the weather here isn't that variable. I live closer to the beach. So in the morning, you have the fog and then it burns off and all that. If you wake up in the morning and it's a beautiful sunshiny, oh my, look how blue the water is. You're like, all right, it's going to be a great day. But I don't look at the weather because if there is rain in the forecast, you're going to hear about it from somebody. Anybody. Like you can't go anywhere without somebody mentioning, do you hear it's going to rain tomorrow? Whatever day. But I was at the grocery store this morning when I pulled out of the house. I'm like, oh, wow. All right. We got something. There is water falling from the sky.
Yeah.
Right. Like I saw Dune 2 over the weekend. And Zendaya says, is it true that where you're from, water falls from the sky? And Timothée Chalamet says, yes, it's true. And we have these large things called oceans. Anyway, I digress. But I'm at the grocery store and the guy looks out the window. The guy checking me out is like, oh, wow, it's really coming down. I said, I had no idea. He goes, yeah, they've been talking about it for a week now. I said,
the buildup.
I was out of town.
You get your groceries now.
I was at, no. It wasn't like a run on the grocery store this morning. It was not like that. It was a typical morning at the grocery store. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the combine. We knew that Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders were the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft. We leave knowing they're the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft. We also leave, at least I do, pretty confident there is going to be, I wouldn't bet my wallet on it because I can't bet. I don't bet. I don't like to bet. But pretty confident there's going to be a 3rd quarterback in the 1st round because there generally is one pushed up in the bottom of the round. I think it's going to be Jackson Dart. How high does he go? I don't know. I think Tyler Shuck is quarterback 3A, QB 3A or B. I think he goes high 2nd round. The guy's got 4 degrees. He played 7 years. A little perspective on Tyler Shuck. He was on campus for 2 years with Justin Herbert at Oregon. He is now going to get drafted in Justin Herbert's 6th year. in the National Football League. But the guy can play, and I all but guarantee you he's going to start a couple of games and maybe even win one or two next year in the NFL. I just don't know that a team is going to put him in the first round. You're going to hear a lot of smoke about Shedeur, how he did or didn't do in his interviews. Can I just caution you? Sometimes stuff gets out because teams want a player to fall to them. Yeah, it's unfortunate. That's how it goes. Shedeur knows this. He grew up in an NFL family. Dion knows how this whole thing works. It's still uncomfortable. Also, by the way, open your mind. Sometimes when you go in for a job interview, not everybody in the room likes you through no fault of your own, or, I mean, anything. There's a number of reasons. If you're applying for a job and there's a hiring committee and the hiring committee has 10 people and you go interview with all 10, there's a chance one or two of those 10 aren't crazy about you. But if 8 of them are, I think 80% is a pretty high score. You're probably going to get the job. So there's a lot of hand wringing, and look, there's a lot of layers to all this about bad mouthing players, but some of it's not really bad mouthing. Some of it's just like, hey, I didn't think he was that great in the room. That doesn't mean he wasn't great talking to the media on Friday, and I was there for that. Thought Shedeur Sanders was fun. He's certainly confident, hat on backwards, but he was jostling with the media, smile on his face. I came away with a good impression, not a bad impression. But if there's one coach or one scout in a room, and he did plenty of interviews, formals and otherwise, that came away going, not crazy about the kid. And then they happen to tell somebody, because that's what happens at the combine. You tell your buddy or you text your buddy, wasn't crazy about the kid, and that gets out. Yeah, that's how this goes. That's how this process unfolds. It isn't a personal attack to say, I wasn't crazy about the guy. Enough people are. He's going to go in the first round. I don't believe the hype that he's falling out of the top 10. We got 2 months to go. He's going to go in the top 10. I came away thinking Cam Ward is the number 1 quarterback. I came in firmly believing it, and nothing I saw or heard at the combine changed that opinion. The only question is, what is Tennessee doing? And nobody knows. Do they keep it, and do they take Cam Ward? Do they keep it, and do they take Abdul Carter, or do they keep it and take Travis Hunter? Those are the 3 options. Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. Those are your 3 options at Tennessee. Behind door number 4 is trade the pick. And that, to me, is the most interesting conversation out of all of this in Indianapolis. Does anybody want Cam Ward enough to go up and get the pick? And what does it cost? I've heard from plenty of people, let's say you're the Browns or the Giants or the Jets or the Raiders, somebody in the top 10 that wants to go up to get a quarterback. You're not going to have to pay that much. I disagree. If you're the Giants and you want to jump the Browns and you want to get to 1, you're going to have to pay. It's not like, hey, here's a 5th round pick. No, that ain't going to cut it. Here's a 3rd round pick. I don't know that that's going to cut it. You're trading up to number 1 for a quarterback. Now, I did a little research. The biggest drop down for a team picking number 1 overall that traded out is 2 spots. In 1975, the Colts went from 1 to 3. The Falcons went from 3 to 1. And the Falcons took Steve Bartkowski at quarterback. No team has ever dropped 1 to 2. 1 to 3, but not 1 to 2. What did it cost to go 1 to 3 in 1975? An offensive lineman. That's it. It's going to cost a lot more this year. What's the price, and how badly does Tennessee truly want to get out, and how good the offers are to move up? That, to me, is now the biggest question hanging over this draft. I think 3 tight ends go in the first round. I think Mason Taylor is the 3rd, along with Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland out of Penn State and out of Michigan. And I do think, and this isn't first round, I think throughout this draft, and this is going to factor when it comes to free agency next week, that there are a minimum of 5 and maybe 7 to 10 is the range of starting running backs in this draft. This is a draft full of starting running backs. It's not just Ashton Genty, it's a long list. North Carolina and Iowa and Tennessee, and go down the list. Georgia, Syracuse. This is a draft full of starting running backs. Now, are all of them going to be starting next year? No, that's unlikely. Some of them will be starting by the end of the year when the veteran gets hurt, which is inevitable. But I do legitimately think that in the next 2 years, in the next 18 months, you will see 7 to 10 A-list, maybe not A-list, but starting running backs out of this draft. As the 30 visits start this week, and as we march closer to free agency, don't believe the mocks. So much will change. It doesn't mean they aren't well intended in the moment, but until you get through free agency, Sam, the mocks only mean so much.
I heard a really interesting conversation earlier today about whether or not you could ever see a day in which free agency takes a backseat to the draft. In other words, if the dates were changed and if you could draft before free agency, and I believe the reason it's designed the way that it is currently is because the NFLPA wants the players that are in the league to get rewarded first. And then the draft.
They want them to get paid.
Exactly. They will get paid first, then the draft happens. So it would never happen, but it would be fast. This is an interesting draft to look at it. This is a year where it would be really interesting to see what would happen if you could make the draft picks first and then you were hitting free agency. That would be different. I know we're going to talk about the free agency class, but that would be a lot different. This is a year where it's interesting because of what you just said. I also wanted to look at Ashton Genty quickly, who is somebody that you have had an eye on for quite some time. You saw Ashton Genty, I believe, his first game of the season, right? Of this, you're right. His second game of the season, and you followed it throughout. You were quick. I mean, you are on my radar in regards to what Genty did, and I understand you didn't discover the kid, but this was a ridiculous. Saquon Barkley had a record-setting season in the NFL, but what Genty did in college football, I'm sorry, but he falls out of bed with 100 yards. He
had 100 yards in every game.
That doesn't happen. I mean, to know every single week that the number one job of the defense is to stop him, and it just never ever happened, not once. Through an entire season, I'm sorry, I just don't understand how that happens, but it did. Would there be anything because of what we saw this season in Derrick Henry, in Saquon Barkley, just in running backs in general, what that happened in the NFL this season? Is there no conversation about Genty as number one? I mean, is there still such a scar on what running back is and the length of career, et cetera? But I still think if I were to close my eyes and just say which player could have the most transformational impact on a team, I don't know that it's not Ashton Genty.
I think he could be that guy. He did check in at only 5'8.5". I don't think that's concerning. You talk to a guy like Maurice Jones-Drew, or you just turn on the tape. His contact balance, his power, it's unrelenting. So the height didn't slow him down. The height's actually, some would argue, an advantage. Here's a crazy one. There are those who think there's a chance he's not the number one back off the board.
Okay, well, that's ridiculous. I understand team and need, but come on.
It's not about team or need. Turn on Omarion Hampton's tape. Turn it on. The running back out of North Carolina. He's got a little Natrone Means in him. Not really. But Natrone Means is now the running back coach at North Carolina under Bill Belichick. There's a little bit different, a little bit of a connection. Yeah. And the reason I mention that is because my buddy Daniel Jeremiah, who works obviously as a Charger broadcaster, in his last mock before the combine, before Hampton put up really good numbers at the combine, has Hampton mocked to the Chargers. So that's coming full circle there with Natrone Means. Anyway, put on the Omarion Hampton tape. He's a bigger, sturdier dude. I do think Ashton Genty goes first. I do also think Hampton goes in the first round. I don't think Caleb Johnson goes in the first round, but one of the two Buckeye backs may go at the bottom of the first. Maybe Travion Henderson although Quinshon Judkins looked really good as well. That's my point. There is so much depth to this running back class, and the free agent running back class is mediocre.
Yeah.
This idea that because Saquon and Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, to a lesser extent, had a really good, Josh Jacobs had really good years, that all the veteran running backs are going to get paid. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Because this year's veteran class isn't as good, number one, and because this year's rookie class is so deep that there is no need to go buy a used car. And I hate to make the car analogy, but that's really what you'd be doing if you're a GM.
And my conversation is more about running back position than free agent running backs based on what happened. In other words,
totally get it.
Right. The eye-opening piece is that Derrick Henry and Saquon and even J.K. Dobbins and Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs had those kind of impacts on those teams this season. Running back, just the resurgence of the running back, I guess, overall is what I want to say. I remember the conversation when Ezekiel Elliott was drafted by the Cowboys, and it was, wow, is there a reach? And I remember the conversation around Bijan Robinson. Can you take a running back this high? And it's just, has it come all the way full circle? I'm not sure, but Genty should be leading that conversation where you start to ask yourself, could it be? Can we start to believe in a running back changing a team's fortunes through the draft?
I think he could. I don't know that pick is going to be in the top 10. However, look, if Ashton Genty goes to the Cowboys and he turns in a 1,500-yard season, it was a transformational pick for them. Right. But he's not going in the top 5. You mentioned Bijan. Go back to 2013. Bijan went number 8 overall. Really good player.
23, not 13. Yeah, 23.
But I said 23, right?
You said 13, but it's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. 23. Yeah. Thank you. Bijan went 8 overall. If they would do it again, would they take him or Jalen Carter, who went 1 pick behind him? Yeah. I don't know what the answer is, but it might be Jalen Carter. Would they take him or would they take Jahmyr Gibbs? Sam Laporta. They already had the tight end, obviously. Sure, yeah. Look, there are other good players out there. Bijan's a good player. Have they gotten the bang for their buck yet for a top 10 running back? He's not a yet. Really good player.
Yeah, but not yet. I would say not yet. Certainly not yet. Not yet, just based on, and again, based on result of season for the Falcons, since he's been drafted also, and you can't knock him necessarily for what an entire team does, but they have not won playoff games with him, and that's it, and that's how teams are judged in this league. So that just hasn't happened. Another question for you in regards to Sanders and Cam Ward, and really a philosophical, but when quarterbacks are drafted, they're always, almost their entire careers are then paired together when you have this debate about who could go higher than another. And the most recent one that sticks in my mind, obviously Mariota Winston was one that had so much conversation about it, but I remember Goff and Wentz. I remember when that conversation, I remember when it was over, when it seemed so obvious that Wentz was the better pick than Goff. In the beginning of that, I remember, right? Wentz was the MVP candidate, and then his team won the Super Bowl, even though it wasn't him leading the way. And then Goff lost in a Super Bowl. But, Jared Goff, obviously, in the longer run.
Jared Goff in 2018 played fantastic football.
And just look at their careers now, right? Wentz is just a non-factor in the league, and Jared Goff, it was a 1 seed in the NFC. Jared Goff is in the MVP conversation this past season. Jared Goff's career goes down at this point as more of a success than Carson Wentz for sure.
Correct.
And Winston Mariota,
Jared's on his 3rd contract.
Right. And so it's so funny to watch. It's so interesting to dissect it. And each year we spend so much time in what we do, in both what we consume and what we discuss. Those conversations happen every season, and it's difficult. Your point about Bijan, probably still got to give it more time. These things, history.
He's a really good player.
Exactly. History will tell us. In the immediacy, we think we have the answer. And then 5 years later, it looks completely different.
Completely. Which takes us to free agency and the quarterback carousel. So free agency opens on Monday. And then, let's back up here. The negotiation window opens on Monday, and then at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, on March 12th, the ball drops and we enter the 2025 new league year. It's when you've got to be under the salary cap. It's when the contracts take effect for the new season. It's the beginning. Okay. So Wednesday morning is, for all intents and purposes, New Year's Eve for the new league year. And then 4 p.m. Eastern time, get your party hats, pop the champagne, watch Ryan Seacrest in Times Square. It is the new league year. Now, a bunch of years ago, as you know, the NFL decided there is so much tampering. Let's just say that the first 2 days or the last 2 days before the new league year, you can negotiate. People have come to call it legal tampering. I'll say it again. It is not legal tampering. You're allowed to negotiate. You just can't finish the deal, shake a hand, and turn it into the league office. You can't do that until 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, but it is not legal tampering. The only tampering right now is illegal tampering. That may or may not be happening right now. May or may not be happening over the weekend on Saturday or Sunday. That's when sometimes maybe people talk about deals that shouldn't be talking about deals. That's actually tampering on Monday and Tuesday. It's not tampering. But when deals are announced within 5 minutes of the legal negotiation period opening, then people shrug their shoulders and go, did you really bang out a 4-year, $100 million contract for that wide receiver in 5 minutes? I mean, come on. Now, maybe you throw out the ballpark numbers and go, hey, we'll give you 100 over 4. It's going to be a 25 APY. We're going to put 52 in the first 2 years. We'll figure the back half out. Are you okay with that? Okay, cool. We're good. And then that's kind of the framework, and you have that. Sometimes that does happen, but there generally needs to be a deeper dive. And sometimes that happens on Sunday, and that actually is tampering. But come Monday, give it a rest, people. It is not tampering. This is not the greatest free agent class. I'll be honest with you. My buddy Greg Rosenthal, who also does a podcast, and he writes on NFL.com. He does every year. He ranks the top 101 free agents. Number 1, T. Higgins, franchise tag. Number 2, Trey Smith, franchise tag. Which means the number 1 free agent on the board is, drum roll, defensive tackle Milton Williams, who had a fantastic Super Bowl and a very good season for the Eagles. Milton Williams, who walking down every major street in America other than Philadelphia,
Yes,
nobody would have any idea who he is. He's a good football player. He deserves to get paid. It's just an example here of how this isn't the most exciting for the big names, for the shiny objects of free agent classes. Behind him, Ronnie Stanley, who's now into his 30s, came back, stayed healthy last year, took a little bit of a pay cut, played well for the Ravens, former first-round pick. Ronnie Stanley would look good. Everyone says New England. How about Kansas City? Joe Tooney's in Chicago. How about Ronnie Stanley in Kansas City? Zach Bond re-signed. That takes us then to Sam Darnold. It is that kind of free agent class. So as excited as you may be for a free agency, and I am as well, I'm just warning you right now, it's not the sexiest of free agent classes. It just isn't. That doesn't mean guys aren't going to get paid. They will, because the cap went up considerably to nearly $280 million.
Now, you may say it's not sexy in regards to free agency. And yes, when you look at if your letter of the law, who is a free agent and who is not, yes. But when you look at players that may be available and that may change teams, then it becomes really exciting. And of course, the totality, including the draft, yes, very much so. Last season was so good. And that's what makes it difficult to compare. Last season with what happened, especially in regards to 2 players we've already discussed. And I don't know that we necessarily thought, and probably Derrick Henry more so than Saquon, it seemed, would make that difference. I mean, giving Derrick Henry to the number 1 running team in the league already, which the Ravens were in 2023, and then adding Derrick Henry for 2024, that we knew that was going to make a massive impact. I think there were it's tough to look back on it now, but there were more questions about whether Saquon would have that kind of an impact on the Eagles. So the free agency class, now we look back at it and we say, wow, look at the difference. But really think about it. I mean, Kirk Cousins is a free agent. Did that have the impact that the Falcons thought it would? Certainly not. I mean, not at all. And I guess they knew it a month later, obviously, in the draft, the way they had it. But when you look at players overall, because of what you're about to talk about with the quarterbacks, I think when we look back on the off season, then it is going to be exciting overall. I just think you're right. The list itself right now, under the true definition of what a free agent is, you're right. Not Milton Williams is not making a splash like that. And it was Milton Williams, we know, in the totality of what the Eagles had on the defensive line is what made him special. I don't know that Milton Williams is going to be a game wrecker all on his own.
Now, there are players being added to that list. Tyler Lockett this morning, and we're taping this on a Wednesday, was cut by the Seahawks. One of my favorite people. He's got broad interests off the field. He's written poetry books. He's performed his poetry in readings and bookstores and slam poetry things in Seattle. He has a very successful real estate business as well in Seattle. So Tyler Lockett is now a free agent. I think he can still play a little bit. And as mentioned here, as we came on the air, if we want to call this coming on the air, Joey Bosa was released tonight by the Chargers. Not a surprise. Honestly, I'm surprised that both he and Khalil Mack, who's also now a free agent, came back last year. In retrospect, it makes sense. Jim Harbaugh wanted, obviously, to pound people. It's a physical brand of football. So he kept Mack and Bosa. Obviously, they adjusted their contracts last year. He got rid of the wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. This time around, however, Ward's the free agent, and Bosa has now been cut. He was the longest tenured Charger. He was the last remaining San Diego Charger, but he hadn't stayed healthy. Joey Bosa, not only 3 healthy seasons in 9 years, that's it. 3 complete healthy seasons in 9 years. But in the last 3 seasons, he missed over a full season worth of games. So I hope he stays healthy. It would be great to see him with his brother Nick up the coast. I don't know where. Also, here's a little fun fact for you. With Joey Bosa being released, remember, the Rams got here in 16. The Chargers got here to LA in 17. There is only one player on either roster left that played in either San Diego or St. Louis, and that is Rams right tackle Rob Havenstein. He is the last one standing. He was a St. Louis Ram, and he is still here. And Les Snead and Sean McVay have made it clear in the last week that Rob Havenstein will be here in 2025 for the Rams. Free agency, look, there's some other names out there that are interesting, certainly, like Nick Bolton's a good player. Javon Holland was one of the top 3-4 safeties in football 2 years ago. Amari Cooper's got some name value. Chris Godwin is a good receiver coming off another bad lower leg injury. Khalil Mack, Justin Fields, Stephon Diggs coming off an injury. Javon Hargrave is going to get cut by the 49ers. Calais Campbell is somehow still playing and not retired. Chase Young was at one point the number 1 pick in the draft. Talanoa Hufanga, also from that 49ers defense, also coming off an injury. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jaron Reed, J.K. Dobbins. We're going deep into the list. Jeremy Chin, 3 or 4 years ago, looked like a game-changing player. Now he get his chance to go somewhere else. Bobby Wagner's a free agent. He may go to Canton one day. He can still play. I would love to see him back in Washington. Meant so much to the community there this year. Joshua Palmer can play a little bit. Nick Chubb on Greg Rosenthal's list is free agent number 101. Browns have said he's going to hit free agency. In my heart, I think Nick Chubb is coming back, but I don't have any real insight there. But it's going to be at a pretty low deal, you'd have to think. Incentive laden, I would hope. I don't want to see him go anywhere else. Anyway, that is the free agent landscape. Let's talk about the quarterbacks because they always are the most interesting part of the free agent equation. And before we get to the quarterbacks, we got to tell you, Kirk Cousins is not a free agent. He is still on the Falcons roster. And Terry Fontenot, the Falcons GM, last week said, why would I cut him? I got to pay him anyway. Why would I cut him? I think he's eventually going to be cut. Right now, it's a staring contest, but there is a good chance that when free agency opens, Kirk Cousins is still a Falcon.
I want to
He
say
has a
one thing
bonus.
What? Before you jump into the quarterbacks, real quick, I just want to say one thing about Bosa, Joey Bosa. You went quickly past it, but Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa together on the Niners, I just think would, especially with Hargrave now moving on from the Niners, that feels like please let that happen. For not being able to see Watt brothers playing together, for all of the opportunities this league has had to see that kind of a special scenario with brothers on the same team on the field at the same time, that feels like the deal that should happen. And I know this is not a fairy tale league where those things happen. It all comes down to money and opportunity, etc. But you quickly went past it, and it is the one scenario that you mentioned. But Joey and Nick Bosa feels like something that this league should see together. We'd love to see that.
We saw with the McCourties a couple of years ago in New England as well. Certainly cool. Back to Kirk Cousins. I think there's a very good chance that when the new league year opens on Wednesday the 12th, Kirk Cousins is still a Falcon. There is a bonus due to him about $10 million a couple of days after the new league year. Right now, they're not moving that deadline, but it might be a staring contest right down to that bonus day. He would love to be a free agent, and if he is one, I don't know that he's going to sign immediately, because if you are Kirk Cousins and you just went through last year in Atlanta, a scenario in which you signed a huge contract and then they took a quarterback at number 9 and you didn't know that was going to happen, why would you go through that again? Even if the team tells you, hey, listen, we want to sign you, we may draft a quarterback. Like, that conversation would be more transparent this year than it was last, obviously. But why would you put yourself in that situation until you found out where they drafted the quarterback and who the quarterback is? Sit back and wait. That is, if you are released. Kirk Cousins has learned his lesson. He also got well paid. He was very well paid last year. Okay. He already made $62.5 million last year. And he still due 27.5. And that extra 10. He's going to get $100 million one way or the other. But if you're him, you may want to wait a little bit. There's Sam Darnold, there's Aaron Rodgers, but really, if you want to break it down, teams that need quarterbacks, there's actually two categories in my mind. There are teams that need quarterbacks, but are probably also going to draft a quarterback. And then there are teams that really need a good backup and are probably willing to pay that backup. Those are the two categories in my eyes of teams when it comes to the quarterback carousel. Teams that need one and are probably going to draft one: the Titans, the Browns, and the Giants, picking 1, 2, and 3, throwing the Jets, the Raiders, and the Steelers. And then you have your list of teams that could and should be playoff teams and need a good backup: the Cowboys, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Ravens, just to name 4. Now, if you're Sam Darnold, you want to go somewhere and start. If you're Aaron Rodgers, you want to go somewhere and start. Sam Darnold's going to make more money than Aaron Rodgers. It's just a fact of life in this world. One's a heck of a lot younger than the other. But if you're a guy like, say, Daniel Jones, or a guy like Justin Fields, both of you think you could and should be starting. I'd throw in Carson Wentz as well, although clearly he's in a different category. He hasn't started in a while behind those other two. Which is a better option for you? For any of them, let's say. Go to Vegas, where the Raiders could very well draft a quarterback at 6. Or, if you're one of those guys, would you rather go to the team that's probably in the playoffs to be a well-compensated backup? Maybe you get your shot, And then you do this whole thing again next year. If you're Justin Fields, do you go to the Jets and start? Or do you go to the Ravens and back up Lamar? Think about it. If you're Daniel Jones, do you go to the Colts and figure out whatever's going on with Anthony Richardson, or the Titans, or the Browns, where they're going to draft a quarterback probably as well? Or do you go to the Ravens, or do you go to the Dolphins? Which is the better scenario? And that to me is kind of the unspoken part of this quarterback carousel that makes Sam next week that much more interesting.
I love this so much. And of course, Stafford, who you had pegged as the linchpin to not only free agency, but the entire draft. So that's sort of an exhale for everyone. You know, Stafford staying with, because the Rams was interesting. I started to fall in love with the idea of Sam Darnold going to the Rams. That was what before the Stafford thing came together, you and I had spoken, we sort of had destinations for everyone. And I never mentioned Darnold with the Rams. And then the more I thought about it, wow, how supported he would be. And to be with McVay and just the pieces that are in place for the Rams and what they did. And if they really were going to move on from Stafford, I just thought, wow, maybe the irony of Darnold, of course, ending his season and this magical run to the Rams and then becoming the starter there. I just thought I think he needs the support. I think he knows he needs the support. I think I still like Darnold most in Minnesota. But when you talk about what's the most fascinating thing that could possibly happen at this point, I don't think Rodgers at all. I mean, yes, Rodgers, if he went to the Raiders, I think it would be interesting just with Crosby now signing with
Rodgers to the Giants.
Yes, you're right.
That's more likely than the Raiders.
Yes. And I think that could be interesting. But is that really, do we think Rodgers is going to have that kind of an impact on the field this season? It's tough. It's tough to
The Giants need a quarterback. They are desperate.
It's tough for me to see. I guess when we
they are
talk
desperate
about having an impact, do we see Rodgers leading a team to the playoffs? You and I were convinced that it was going to happen this season with the Jets, and it was so far from that. It's difficult. He's in the Russell Wilson Denver Broncos category right now. That's exactly where Rodgers is.
How about Russell Wilson to the Giants? Look, let me give this scenario. We wake up this morning. We wake up tomorrow morning. Joe Shane checks his phone, and the Raiders have traded up to number 1. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Tennessee wants to fall that far. But let's say it happens. What do the Giants do? I mean, you'd have to think that there isn't a quarterback now for them at 3. So what do they do? What do they do if perfect scenario for the Giants, the Titans stay and they take Abdul Carter. The Titans stay and they take Travis Hunter. Perfect scenario there for the Browns as well, I would have to think. But what if the Raiders or the Browns get jumped? I take that. What if the Giants get jumped? They need a quarterback. They know, Brian Daboll and Joe Shade, that while there isn't a playoff mandate, like they got to do something this year, right? That's why they were in on Matthew Stafford.
That is borrowed time. The Giants,
right? So then, what do you do if you're them?
They have to be convinced it's coming in the draft. And to your point, if they get jumped on if there's a scenario where they can't get Cam or Shedeur, they're in a brutal spot.
Well, right now, if they don't move, there's a good chance they don't.
Stafford was by far the belle of the ball in every way. It's fun to say the names, but even if you include Geno in the list and go through all the names that could be someone else's quarterback, if without Stafford in that list, it's really a list of quarterbacks that you don't actually think are going to lead the Giants to the playoffs.
Then on that list, why not roll with Aaron Rodgers?
Is Rodgers the top of that? Say, okay, let's go through it. Okay,
Sam Darnold's not coming.
Right, Darnold's not going to New York again. He doesn't want to see ghosts in New York again, and he knows what it's like to not be supported beautifully the way he was in Minnesota.
Okay, so then who's coming?
Then you're talking about Russell Wilson potentially. I don't think that makes the Giants a playoff team. No, not Kirk Cousins. Yes, I could. No, I don't think Cousins at this point. I think Atlanta was a better situation.
Give me an option.
I don't think that's at all.
It's not Daniel Jones.
Fields in a season. I don't think it's Justin Fields. I just don't. There would have to be so much more around them. The only thing I believe in for the Giants is is a Jaden Daniels type of scenario where where Shedeur or Cam has a Jaden Daniels.
They're number 3. They're not picking first or
Tennessee,
second.
Right. Okay, so Tennessee,
so they've either got to get to 1 or pray Tennessee doesn't take a quarterback.
And that's so Tennessee at this point should be having that conversation. That Tennessee at this point should be fleecing New York for that. Tennessee should be convincing everyone they're taking a quarterback and should make that deal. And when you look back,
not just New York, not just the Giants, anybody.
Yes, but
that wants a quarterback.
They should be talking quarterback only. That should be every rumor I read should be Tennessee taking a quarterback, and then they shouldn't, and they should trade. And what I'm looking back at when you talked about scenarios and the 1975 scenario with Bartkowski, I always go back when you talk about trading for a quarterback. The dream for any team that's got the pick and wants to trade, of course, is the Rams and Washington and RG3. Now, would that ever happen again? And of course, history does not look kindly on the idea that 3 first-round picks was RG3, who in the end, the career was not there. The start was what it was.
No one's trading 3 to get up to 1 this year.
Of course not.
Now, hold on. If like the Steelers wanted to do it, then, they're at 21. It would take that much.
I believe 6-2 is what Rams and Washington, back then the Redskins. I believe the Redskins Rams was 6-2. I believe the Rams were at 2 and Washington was at 6. I believe that. Yeah, I just looked because I wanted to make sure it was the 3 first-round picks. I think it was 6-2. So that's 4. That's a jump of 4. But unlike your scenario going all the way to 1, still 22. Yes, it would take that for Pittsburgh.
If you're the Giants, do you give up next year's 1 to go 3-1?
I think Shane could talk himself into that based on the idea. There isn't a hotter seat in football than Joe Shane.
That's my point.
There's not a hotter seat. Forget about head coaches. There's not a hotter seat in the NFL than Joe Shane. I can't. Nobody. That was the most.
Please don't bring him Hard Knocks again. I'm not. The rest of the world's over it.
I don't even care about that. What I'm saying is, think about the city, the media in New York, which I know people say is overhyped, but bottom line is, there is not a hotter seat than Joe Shane. The most surprising headline of the offseason to this point still is Shane and Dable coming back. I will stand by that. That was just the Giants with what happened with Daniel Jones, etc. That feels like a swing and a miss. It just does.
I would argue that Joe Shane had a great draft. Malik Neighbors, Tyler Nubin, Andrew Phillips, Theo Johnson, Tyrone Tracy. He had a good draft. He really did. People want to overlook it.
No, I don't. But you can't tell me that he's not dreaming of grooming the next Jaden Daniels.
Sure.
Anybody would.
Anyone is.
But they're in position to do it. And to miss out on that shot, unless they love Jackson Dart. I mean, that would be nice. I mean,
Jackson Dart's not going 3rd. I'd be stunned.
Exactly. But I remember, I remember it's an NBA analogy, but I remember when the Celtics were picking at 3, they loved Jason Tatum. And at the top of the draft ended up being Markelle Fultz, and they fleeced everyone into trading to get to 1 to get Fultz. And Tatum simply landed to them at 3. And he's the transformational player. I mean, that could happen if someone had that kind of foresight to know that neither Shedeur nor Cam was the guy, but the 3rd quarterback selected was. That would be beautiful. And Joe Shane would have a statue in New York at that point.
Sure. So anyway, what the Titans do, I think, is as big a question mark over all of this. I want to give you a heads up, though, on another quarterback situation that's brewing. So Wednesday, we mentioned Tyler Lockett has been released by the Seahawks. DK Metcalf officially asked for a trade. Now, over the weekend, actually last week, a lot of rumblings. Well, maybe DK to the Packers. Maybe DK might get traded. That's one thing. And then you hear, no. DK has asked for a trade. Deebo Samuel this past weekend got only a 5th-round pick from Washington. I think it's a good deal for both teams. It's only a 5. You're paying 1 year, around $17 million. Like, you have the salary cap space. Why not? Take a flyer. I know he was a little big last year, built like a running back, not a wide receiver, especially last year. I think he's still got something in the tank, and I think it's going to be fun to see what Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury can do with him. And for the 49ers, it's a dead cap hit, but at the same time, you get his contract off the books. You drafted Ricky Pearsall last year. I do think it's a win-win, but it was only a 5. Okay. Amari Cooper got a 3. What's his name? Stephon Diggs got a 2. There are a lot of veteran wide receivers that you don't get good value for. Mike Williams got a 5 last year in return. There's not a lot of value out there for veteran wide receivers. DK Metcalf is different, though. He's still an elite playmaker. I think it's going to cost a lot to get him out of Seattle, but I digress. So DK Metcalf has asked for a trade. Tyler Lockett has been released. The Seahawks are kind of in a quandary on Geno Smith. He's a starting quarterback coming off another statistically highly productive season. He this year is going to get paid $25 million, which is below what the market pays for a quarterback of his experience and his numbers. He signed that 3-year, $75 million deal. It was clean. This third year is $25 million. 25 in cash. I mean, that's it. He counts 38 on the cap. Geno would like a new deal. The Seahawks have 32 in cap space. Do they extend him? They have Sam Howell last year, or they got Sam Howell last year as a backup, right? I think they gave up a 4, something like that, to get the former Washington draft pick who started games a couple of years ago. Can Geno Smith be had? Do the Seahawks get into a staring contest in the next 3 days? And is Geno Smith on the market? And if so, how does he change the quarterback conversation? That, to me, is the fascinating wild card in all of this. Regardless, you should not forget about the Seahawks when it comes to the draft in April. If Geno sticks around, guys, he's on the last year of his deal. John Schneider can get aggressive. Don't discount the Seahawks and Geno Smith in this entire quarterback conversation.
Well, now that you said it, Raiders, and of course there's the Seattle conversation because of Pete Carroll and that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Max Crosby signing tells you that the Raiders feel tells me they feel that they're close.
Think
it does. It does. It tells me they think they're close. Because Max Crosby. I mean, will Max Crosby dominate this league for a decade? No, but I could say 5 years for sure. Does getting a quarterback that's immediately ready for 9 wins, who Geno Smith is? Geno Smith feels like 9 wins. That's you could get
the Raiders. The Raiders have a lot of holes.
I think Geno plugs a pretty big one. Geno's an upgrade for them at quarterback.
Absolutely, he is.
He's an upgrade for a team that was close with Antonio Pierce. Not this past season, but the season before. Geno Smith, tough division, but Geno Smith, the Raiders feel like a playoff team with Geno Smith. Period. Now the question is, you don't think?
Do you mean that?
Yes, I think because I think he's that much.
I would have traded Max Crosby.
Okay, but I'm having this conversation because they didn't.
Yeah,
having this conversation.
I would have traded him. I love the guy. I would have traded him.
But they didn't. So that means this new regime feels they are close. Geno tells me you're closer to getting that immediately than not. A drafted, again, Jaden Daniels, this is once a decade. Jaden Daniels is once a decade. Once a decade. The likelihood it's going to happen back-to-back seasons.
You're not getting that guy at 6.
Exactly. So the Raiders are either the scenario where you said they're jumping to 1 or 2, or they're going down the route of the quarterbacks that we didn't love when we went through the carousel, and therefore Geno to me becomes the belle of the ball now that Stafford's out of it.
Yeah, I don't know that he's going to be a free agent, but I don't know. I don't know that he's going to be a trade. I'm just saying, you know what? It's an interesting one to watch because very rarely do you let your starting quarterback go into the final year of his deal, right?
That's it. I love it with Chip and Pete. I think that would be special for Geno, and he's proven that he deserves something.
I agree. He deserves an extension of some kind somewhere. I don't know what the Seahawks are going to do. They have 32 million in cap space as of now on Wednesday night. And then finally, let's get this out of the way on Saquon Barkley. Totally unnecessary deal. The Eagles did not have to do it. The contract that he signed, Saquon signed last year when he left the Giants and went to the Eagles, it's not even a year old as we sit here right now. But the Eagles had the room. The Eagles made a little bit more room by paying some money to him. And the Eagles said, you know what, dude, you deserve this. It's almost like a bonus. You had as good a year for a running back, playoffs included, that we've ever seen. Congratulations, Saquon. Here is a nice post-holiday bonus. Good organizations do that. And look, they didn't have to. I don't know that in retrospect it was the right thing to do, but it was the right thing by Saquon. And it shows your locker room that you are willing to do the right thing for anyone that goes above and beyond for the organization. Little perspective here. As we sit here right now, there are 22 NFL wide receivers that have an APY, an average per year of 20 million or more. Justin Jefferson's at the top at 35 million. How many running backs do you think have an APY of 20 million? One. Just one. Saquon Barkley is one of one. He is the only running back with an APY of 20 million or more. Now, we haven't really seen the contract extension yet. We haven't really seen how they moved around the money. I don't know that he's actually going to make 20 million in any of the seasons. NFL contracts are a bunch of funny money, but at least right now, the reported contract on paper is an APY of 20 million. Saquon deserves it. He's the only back in the NFL that can say he has hit that number. Good for him.
It's the greatest season any running back has ever had. When you look at it, when you include the playoffs, it's the greatest season ever. Terrell Davis ran for 2,000 yards and also won a Super Bowl as well. But Saquon in the MVP conversation, Offensive Player of the Year, setting the records that he did, not only for the Eagles, but for the league. Most rushing yards ever in a season, including playoffs, and to win the Super Bowl on top of it all. Yes. Now, all of that being said, I'm a little surprised.
They didn't have to do it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with the
totally unnecessary.
It's surprising. Howie Roseman, over the course of his career, has not been nostalgic. And the best GMs in the game are not nostalgic. And yes, Saquon Barkley is not a lifetime Eagle. It's one season, but as I already mentioned, it's the greatest. He's the greatest Eagle of all time. I've said that. I made that comment, and I know you laugh at that a little bit. I still stand by it. He's the greatest Eagle of all time, and he did it in one season. But that being said, I'm surprised when you include Zach Bond being signed for the money that he did. And of course, Zach Bond earned it in every single way, the same way that Saquon did, up for Defensive Player of the Year, and to do what he did in the turnaround under Vic Fangio's defense. But rarely do the best GMs in this league, quote unquote, run it back. And that's a little bit of what this feels like in a way, throwing money at what happened already. Look, Howie Roseman has proven us wrong time and time again. He knows what he's doing with his money. I trust him with the checkbook. I trust Howie Roseman at this point with the overall checkbook. But I am surprised to throw this kind of money. And it's tough to say at a running back, right? Saquon Barkley, as you said, is not a running back. Saquon Barkley is not a running back. He's proven that. He is not just a running back. But that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But you know what? It makes sense. Highest paid running back ever for greatest running back season of all time, as you said, it's sort of a congrats. But I'm surprised. Howie Roseman to me does not strike me as the kind of guy that gets nostalgic in these scenarios and gives the money in that way.
I really want to see what the actual contract reads. I'm not calling BS here. I would like to see what the actual cash flow is. I'd love to see it, and we will eventually. I'm not I'm not saying that the reporting is all baloney, but is there really a season in which he earns 20? When is that season? Is it in 2 years and it's all mythical? I don't know. I'm not questioning good reporting here, but I would love to see the cash flow to see if there's actually a season in which he makes 20 million. I hope he does. He deserves it. He truly does. I'm happy for the guy.
Yeah, you're saying essentially is this for the headline, right? For the headline to read highest.
Look, he clearly got some more money.
Definitely.
He clearly got more money. And at a minimum, that is a win. And that's a sign of a good organization showing the player some love. And I'm happy for it. Would love to see what the actual numbers come out to be. That's all. And that is actually a perfect transition to a goodbye with a friendly reminder that as you do hear the reporting, and I'm not calling out any particular reporter, we're all guilty of it. Okay. As you do hear numbers reported over the next how many ever days when it comes to free agency, pump the brakes and wait until you see the actual guarantee and over how many years that guarantee is paid. And then that is your real APY. That it's not how the calculation is done because NFL teams, and this is how the salary cap works, always have, ridiculous numbers on the back ends of contracts to lower the cap hit on the early years of the contract. Understanding no one's ever going to see those last couple of years. We're going to have to renegotiate or you're just going to get cut. We're going to take the cap hit, whatever. Okay. Just wait until you see the actual cash flow. And you see this all the time when, let's say, a player gets cut or runs afoul of the law or something like that. And the TMZs or the tabloids of this world will say, player wasted $150 million contract. And you go, okay, well, it is an unfortunate thing that happened, but he was never going to see $150 million. He even knows that as well. That was just baloney reporting, and the back end was irrelevant. But I digress. Sam, stay safe in the rain, my friend.
Yes, we will have two hands on the wheel for sure.
Two hands on the wheel. Stay safe in the rain. Enjoy free agency, everyone. Be sure to like and subscribe. The subscribing thing is a big deal if you're on the YouTube channel or the pod for that matter. To this show, for Sam Betesh, I'm Andrew Siciliano. We are thinking out loud.